Hello, and welcome to the Thinking Elixir podcast, where we cover the news of the community and learn from each other. My name is Mark Erickson.
And I'm David Bernheisel.
Let's jump into the news. First up, Phoenix LiveView 1.1.0 has a new release candidate out. This is an RC2. So Stefan has been hard at work on this. If you remember from our discussion with Chris McCord, he really credited Stefan as having pushed a lot of this forward while Chris was a little MIA working on Phoenix.new. So Stefan shared a little bit more about what's going on in this new release candidate. In particular, we had talked previously about this idea where a new key attribute was being used in Heeks templates to add change tracking, and that the underlying implementation of it was going to be turning some things into live components behind the scenes just to take advantage of other optimizations. Well, Stefan ended up coming back around on that and doing it a different way. So that's part of RC2. In this, he says, all comprehensions are change tracked now. There's no key. We use the index to track changes. This means that prepending an item leads to all following items being considered change, so giving a key is still very useful. So you can imagine if you ever wanted to swap the order around, then adding that key attribute will make that much more efficient. But it's no longer taking the approach of creating live components for all the things, because they discovered that when working with much more complex components, it actually had the inverse and it became less efficient because Phoenix already had all these other efficiencies in there around Heeks templates. So now, really, you're still going to get this new key attribute, and it does allow more efficient calculation of position changes, but it has a fallback to indexing if nothing else is added. We've got a link to the Blue Sky thread where Stefan goes into more depth on that. And we also got a link to the changelog for RC.2. But Stefan says this is quite a substantial change. Therefore, we'd love it if you could try out the new RC in your projects and report any problems you find.
Yeah, when we're talking about like lists of things and using a key, my brain is telling me you need to use Phoenix Streams instead, which is probably already has a lot of these optimizations. But I know that there's a lot of like simple comprehensions of things, that you might be doing as well. And so a key, is probably very, very useful. I'm still thinking, I'm trying to like compare in my head, like how is React doing this? Because I know they have a key over there as well to minimize, all the change. Not change detections in the way that LiveView is doing things, but like how to re-render. That ends up being a massive like performance issue for them a lot of times. Is everything's re-rendering all the time. When some context way up in the tree ends up changing, like everything underneath gets re-rendered. Anyway, glad to see the progress. And also, maybe not as part of RC2, but as part of 1.1, this release also includes those co-located JS hooks, which is also pretty cool. And my JavaScript friends out there are going to be happy to hear they added TypeScript type annotations to all those public JavaScript APIs as well. Very notable changes. Those are not nothings. Those are good things to have.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, Jose Valim was interviewed by DevLabs. Who's DevLabs? Well, it's a podcast run by a consultancy called Evil Martians. Emphasis by me, Evil Martians. I'm sure they do a lot of really fun things. I heard of them a long time ago. They're, to me, I see them as a good old Ruby shop, though I'm sure they do a lot of other things as well. Anyway, we've got a link to an X post where they talk about this and the YouTube video as well. And Jose Valim is on feeding the desire to learn, about talking about the healthy Elixir ecosystem and the future of AI tooling. Those are the big topics. So there are some key, highlights that we'll share here. So we'll pull some quotes out. This is actually quotes that they pulled out as well. So here's a quote: "I'm building things for me." Which is great. And by me, we mean Jose. While others chase adoption metrics, Jose is building tools that he genuinely wants to use. And so the authentic marketing around it resonates with developers because he can explain real trade-offs, right? Not fabricated investor beholden benefits, right? Here's another one. Don't get in the way. Attitude. This is what Jose, I guess, has, right? He has a don't get in the way attitude, which has allowed to build a healthy and thriving community around the language and decentralize the ecosystem where the community really owns the different domains. For example, got web, which is mostly the Phoenix community there. You've got machine learning. It's got a very thriving community there with NX, among other things. You've got the embedded community thriving with nerves, among other things. Atom VM, is coming to mind as well for that one, which is somewhat new. And then data processing. That's probably what I do most day to day, is just how do you shepherd all of the data through all the right pipelines. Broadway really comes into view here as well as things like RabbitMQ, which is built on Erlang as well. All that kind of like data processing shepherding. So these are all like huge pillars in the ecosystem. Yeah, Jose is really like he just doesn't want to get in the way. He wants everyone to have the freedom to build what they need to build. Last one. Here's the quote. Marketing is extremely important. Developers don't like to think about it. That's the end of the quote. I agree. I have a hard time with this myself. So Jose went to conferences. He's talked to CTOs. He's gotten influential people to write books about it. You can't just build great tech and hope. You can't just build hope, right?
That is so common. Say you build a library and you're really happy with this library. Maybe it's really helping you, but you don't really think about marketing. You'll just figure out, if other people just knew about this, they would get the same great benefits I'm getting. It's a different mindset, right? To really go on the kind of offensive and being the evangelist for this new language or library or product or whatever it is. Sometimes I think developers are just hoping someone else will discover this and then they'll be the one to go to conference talks and talk about it. But that's never going to be the same vision. It's never going to get all the details right. Never going to have the backstory. We need to do that ourselves, and that's a challenge. But for developers, I think, but it's super important.
Yeah, you can't just build great tech and hope. I've been watching Andor. Highly recommend it for everyone out there. By the way, probably the best Star Wars series. And there's a great line in there. Of course, Star Wars. The rebellions are built on hope. Right? That's the quote. So if Elixir is a great old rebellion against other popular languages, they're built on hope, not just great tech.
That's fun. Today's episode is sponsored by Paraxial.io. Every day, hackers search the internet for vulnerable applications aiming to steal sensitive data, commit fraud, and spitefully ruin the weekend of a hardworking developer. Paraxial.io is the first and only security platform with full Elixir support that stops these attacks. Developers love the Elixir native protection, and management loves the Paraxial.io metrics that detail the security accomplishments of engineering, which is all required for SOC 2, ISO, and HIPAA compliance. Sign up for a free trial at Paraxial.io today and mention Thinking Elixir when you schedule a demo for a special offer. Check it out today at Paraxial.io, and thank you to Paraxial for sponsoring. And next up, Matthew Sinclair, who's a developer in Australia, got tired of repeatedly explaining why Elixir was a great choice, so he wrote it all up in a post. Now you have something that you can refer to as well. So it's all on the question of like, why should I choose Elixir? And on online forums, meetups, you're talking to people, you're just meeting people, and you're like, you're excited about Elixir, and you're like, why should you use Elixir? Sometimes that can be a little bit hard to articulate. So this is just a nice little post to pull together a bunch of different technologies and ideas just to give you something to think about and maybe some more examples for how it's a good fit for things. So he goes through 9 different reasons. So I'm just going to touch on a few of them because I think I agree with these. Number 1, Elixir is built for scalability, concurrency, and resilience. And, you go into the depth of that and you think about the Beam and the OTP engine and really what that was built for and the legacy of it. It's not just like, oh, here's the latest, greatest hotness. It's like, no, this is tried and true. This has really been built through the furnace of fire, right? This is a honed tool. And that's one of the things that we get to benefit from as Elixir is building on top of that. And another one is that it's a mature production grade ecosystem. And really, you think about the Beam, that's part of that. But then you go further and you say we have things like Phoenix, for web frameworks. We have Oben for job processing. Broadway, David, you were talking about that for doing data processing. Telemetry and Live Dashboard for real-time insights. NX and Axon and all the things going on in the ML space. And then there's more, it's become a very mature ecosystem.
From there, it kind of dives into each of those, right? So you have Phoenix, which he says is the best full stack web framework. Wholeheartedly agree. There's nothing else like LiveView out there. He goes into Ash framework. If you haven't heard of it or used it, it's declarative, backends with extreme, leverage. Leverage here meaning you kind of like declare all of your resources, kind of once, and then you've got the Ash ecosystem that can really leverage all of those declarations in a variety of ways, like a back office UI, JSON APIs, Oben, all that kind of stuff. You can just like really plug into that really easily. Goes into NX as well. NX stands for numerical Elixir, so the number crunching area and the ML future. Personally, I'm trying to, get into that realm now. I've been writing a MCP framework called Phantom to kind of pair along with like Phoenix to really open the doors for existing Elixir apps out there that now also want to like serve up an MCP server. And maybe the last one I'll mention for now is, AI native language model compatibility, right? So it goes into this, in more detail, but we'll try to summarize it a little bit. But Elixir's foundations, in functional programming with pure functions, right? Immutable data, separation of concerns, that kind of stuff makes it easier for large language models to reason about, generate, and test codes, right? This is you using something like Claude Code to write some Elixir code. It does a pretty remarkable, job with that. LLMs struggle with more imperative code bases with a bunch of side effects or hidden state and indirection. It's just, I'll raise my hand. Humans do too.
It's hard for me to reason about for sure.
Yeah. And so Elixir code is like naturally composable, kind of declarative a bit, and inspectable. So LLMs are able to kind of like self-lead themselves into a solution. Though it does admittedly struggle a bit with macros. I'll raise my hand. I do too sometimes. But when shown what a good one looks like, it usually can manage it without much difficulty. So yeah, like all these are, spot on. I think these are all great points.
Yeah, so it's just a handy resource if you're looking for examples to back up some of the recommendations to use Elixir. And I think of that when you're maybe at a company and you're suggesting, hey, we need this new service or this new thing. I think Elixir might be a good fit for this. And I have something to reach for that makes it easier to not forget those important things and, jumping points off into more tech.
Some conversations are like, well, okay, fine. It's another syntax, maybe a little bit more verbose because it's functional. But what else is it giving me, right? This is the last point maybe in the article is like, here's what you don't need to worry about right? in Elixir, which sometimes is even more powerful than talking about all the things that it can do well. It's here are all the things you don't even have to think about. And so some examples are WebSockets, async and like thread management. That's the whole OTP platform. Monitoring and instrumentation. I mean, you do kind of have to worry about that a little bit. But I will say that Elixir is like really good in the telemetry and measuring kind of realm. That doesn't mean that everything is auto-instrumented automatically, perfectly, just by installing one thing or something, right? Like you still have to do a little bit of work here.
Yeah, I think part of the point there though is you have things like the Beam have monitoring abilities built into it. Right.
Oh, right.
So I can use other tools like Recon that you can just hex install and they'll be on your production environment where you can just get some quick insights of what's going on. What are my top 5 processes and things like that. Yeah. And then, you can do like the observer, like there's the OTP observer, which I can run locally on a desktop, but there's also a CLI version of that I could run on my server, right? I just have observability built into the framework.
Yeah, and then Live Dashboard as well for the web version of that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, my head's stuck in OTel world. But yeah, there's 2 OTel ones, right? There's the telemetry one, which are just like it's like a little framework of callbacks within the same process. But like this is the way that you sprinkle your measurements throughout your code base, but then you handle it all in one area. So it kind of consolidates that. So that's good. But that doesn't send it to telemetry platforms like Honeycomb or something. And so that's where open telemetry comes in and you start like putting a lot more stuff in there, like attributes of, what the web request was about. Anyway, and there are a lot of good like starting points out there for that kind of stuff. But you tying into that is the work. And then last up, is like there was a strong testing culture, with Elixir, and so testing, mocks, fixtures, with all this like async and process oriented kind of architecture, you kind of have to be good. You have to have good tooling. I mean, to do that well. And I do think that Elixir is really really excels in that area. Default async tests, is really helpful.
True. Yeah, I will say, like, when I previously wanted to try out some JavaScript framework, right? And I would go to look and say, well, how do I get started with this? And there's all these choices that you have to make, and like all these different testing libraries and that you could use. And I don't know. I don't know where to start. So someone has to give me their opinionated set of these are all the things you should do. But it just makes it hard to get started with any level of confidence. So Elixir having a lot of that built in, where we have XUnit, which is a great testing library, and then
fantastic
fixtures, you don't actually need a whole fixture library, an extra external thing to do that. That's just some really simple Elixir code. I think we may underappreciate some of those benefits that we have in the Elixir community too.
Yeah. And maybe last point, I'm probably belaboring this, but I can imagine other ecosystems out there. I'm thinking about C# or, Python, JavaScript, all that kind of stuff. You've got these huge corporations that kind of build these products around these ecosystems to fill gaps that the language itself couldn't fill on its own. Admittedly, sometimes easier experience, with one of these things that we're talking about, right?
Right.
But it's a corporate-backed solution you'll probably have to pay a lot of money into, unless it's open source, which hopefully it is, but you're not going to get Datadog for free, Datadog, for example, has like a good no-code Python tracing app. It's not because Python made it easy to trace things. It's because it didn't make it hard. It didn't make it easy to trace things. So they had to write a whole thing around it to make it easy for you to choose Datadog, who made it easy for you. You know what I'm saying? So like, it's that kind of stuff. Now, look, it's out there, and that tool is free, but the platform isn't, right? And so, good, if you're trying to go to some other telemetry kind of thing, you'd be vendor locked, at that point, which maybe you wouldn't be. But anyway, just little things like that, right? All right, well, I'll shut up about that. But WebSockets and async and thread management are very underappreciated. I know we talk about it all the time with OTP platforms. It's like it's distinguishing, feature, but it is something that I'm so happy that I don't have to really think about a lot.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Back to the community a little bit. So there's a fellow out there, Peter Solnika. He shared a teaser. He rebuilt ROM.rb in Elixir. So I don't see where this is made public, so he's probably just excited to share about it. He shared a screenshot. Looked pretty interesting. We got a link to that screenshot. All right, so if none of that just made sense to you, let me explain. Who is Peter, first of all? Peter is a creator of ROM.rb and many dry RB gems and a former Hanami core team member. Okay, still don't know what that means, right? It's okay. These are all larger Ruby frameworks. And so in the Ruby community, Rails is king for sure. And if you didn't want the king, Rails, you would probably be looking at something like ROM and Hanami. ROM is similar to Active Record, just a different design philosophy. In fact, ROM, in my opinion, is much closer to Ecto. And so it's very similar in some patterns like that. ROM stands for Ruby Object Mapper. Ecto is a mapper as well, right? Hanami is this is not going to be an exact comparison, but if you could think of Hanami is probably more like Plug, whereas Rails has this whole Rails has this whole thing on top, this batteries included kind of approach. Phoenix kind of has that, as well. Hanami would be like Plug, where it's a little bit more than just straight up rack, but not as much as Rails. But it's also just a different philosophy of building things. They're all just frameworks in Ruby that rival the popular Rails framework. Here's some quotes from them. Hanami is a Ruby framework designed to help you create software that is well architected, maintainable, and a pleasure to work on. And then here's ROM. Ruby Object Mapper, ROM, is an open source persistent and mapping toolkit for Ruby built for speed and simplicity. there you go. So Peter is from that ecosystem over there, has lots of experience building these kinds of things, and he is, at least in the past couple of years, I know, been in the Elixir community as well. He's built several apps, so it's pretty cool to see him build ROM in Elixir, and it's on top of Ecto, if I recall correctly, is what his post says. So it's not reinventing a lot of things, but it is a different way of loading things, looking for stuff in your database. And so it could be really interesting paired with Ecto because, well, Ecto, you define your schemas, you have a repo, but querying that stuff out of there can be quite tedious. And by tedious, I mean, you write SQL, right? But in a DSL, Ecto queries DSL. ROM might wrap up that part to give you more simple, I guess, functions for like getting common, attributes and structs out of the database. So his example has one that says, you def module users, you use, this new thing that he's making here. We'll just call it, use relation. And then from there, it kind of injects a bunch of functions. And so then you can pipe here, you can say users, pipe into users dot get by email. Well, get by email is not a function you made. It's a function that it made. And then you pipe that into users dot restrict, and you pass in the attributes in here. So I get maybe restrict is like a select here. And then that's kind of it. Pass that into something that instantiates that streamable, kind of struct thing. So he passes that into enum.count, and there you go. You have a number 1, or you pass it into enum.map, and then there you go. You have the list of attributes that you're plucking out of there. All that is much better illustrated with a screenshot. So you should definitely go check that out. And if he does end up releasing this will be, I don't know. I think that could be a really good winner of a library in the Elixir ecosystem. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, it's just fun when people experiment with different ideas from different places, different communities, right? And say, does this map on well? And from that, we often discover either, if not that as the solution, then some other type of improvement that can be brought into the community. And so, we all win for people playing.
Yeah, I'm really curious where that's going to go. Yeah. I'm hoping for the best.
And next up, a fun little stat about Igniter. So Zach Daniels shared that Igniter now has 45 packages that use Igniter to simplify installation of those packages. So just a fun little thing to think about. It's getting some adoption because Zach Daniel has been actively marketing it, right? He's been marketing Igniter, and that's how you get adoption. So if I'm keeping it real, Zach Daniel has been involved with doing some of those himself on other libraries.
Probably.
It's like, I want this to exist in that library. I'll do that as a PR.
All right. Hey, around the corner is ElixirConf 2025 in the US. I know. It's coming so quickly. And if you haven't gotten your ticket yet, I've got some news for you. We've got a exclusive discount code. You type in Thinking Elixir, that's a big T, big E in there, Thinking Elixir into their form, and you'll get a 10% off discount off the ticket price, excluding the in-person training ones. Or if you don't want to remember that discount code, that's fine. You come to the show notes, there's a little link we got, and it'll take you straight there where it will reflect the pricing right then and there. So since we're talking about ElixirConf US, that is going to be held in Orlando, Florida on August 28th through the 29th. Workshops on the 27th, right before. And the ticket prices without the discount code is about $1,000, right? That's just the ticket. With the discount code, you can knock off about $100, right? And so right now it's at normal pricing. If you wait longer, until let's see, the 20th of August, so about a week prior to the conference, that price is going to increase. So if you think you're going to go, you might as well get the ticket while it's a little bit cheaper. And we can help you out by getting it even a little cheaper with that 10% off discount code. So go check that out. And maybe I'll see you at ElixirConf. All right, next up, we'll shift over to some industry news.
I'm sure you've heard of the company Figma, right? They can often be considered a competitor to Adobe, where Adobe tried to buy them for $20 billion or something like that. And that was considered a no-go competition problem kind of thing. So now Figma has expressed their intention of going public. And with that, they filed their S1 filing with the SEC, or the Security and Exchange Commission. And it just revealed something I thought was surprising. And I think a lot of people kind of freaked out about this, just like, whoa, my goodness, what's going on? And what it was, in short, Figma pays about $300,000 per day for AWS services.
Not surprised. I've worked at Stripe before. Like, I know the kind of like, oh my gosh, kind of numbers that are out there, these large companies.
Yeah.
It's unfathomable.
And lots of us, we don't get that insight, right? We're not at those companies, or maybe if we are, we're in some division or something like that. And we don't get that full big insight. But what the filing states is that Figma entered into a renewed hosting agreement with AWS. And they did this on May 31st, which commits to a minimum of $545 million in cloud hosting services over the next 5 years. That works out to be just under $300,000 a day for Figma. But there's no clarity on how it's broken down into storage, compute, bandwidth, or any of that. We don't have any of that detail. In addition to the high hosting costs, Figma noted that its platform is entirely dependent on AWS's performance and can be affected by outages. So, as part of these documents, they have to say, what are the risks? What are the, trying to have clarity for investors. So declaring, yeah, we're at really the mercy of AWS. And that if AWS were to change their services or policies, it could really hurt us. And if AWS were to cancel the contract, Figma would be further challenged, as its cloud service infrastructure is designed specifically to run on AWS. So they have chosen to really lock in and take advantage of, all these different AWS features. It's just interesting, right? I think of Elixir and how much more efficiently it can be run, and I think maybe I'm just not thinking about this right. I would be hard pressed to make an Elixir application get to anywhere near that level of expense, even if I thought I had a huge user base, right? I don't know that I could get there.
I don't know that it's all 300,000 like operating expenses, like to just be there in the public. It's probably a lot of internal costs as well. So for example, they might have this, I don't know this for sure, but I know that it's popular in other companies. They might have a policy that says no one really has their own laptops. Everyone gets like a Chromebook, like a piece of junk for, their actual hardware. But then they all do development on dedicated EC2 instances for themselves, right? For each developer out there.
It's true. Yeah. There could be things like that we don't even think about.
And then therefore everything's on S3, and then they probably build, years worth of CI minutes, on AWS runners, like constantly, every day, which is just going into that cost again. Who knows? I'm sure there's a lot in there, but yeah, man, can you just imagine, like, if I can't even imagine these companies that end up being so large like this, they start to like transition into this politics realm. And I don't mean like American government kind of politics, but like, if you could imagine that kind of behavior, but at a corporate level, that's just like stick it to the man, kind of like, oh, I just, I had a really awful conversation with them and now I don't like them. You know what? We're going to really hurt them where it hurts. we're just going to like, if AWS just decided to be like really spiteful and just like, I don't care how much this hurts me. We're here, we're going to just burn the world down, like we're going to really see what kind of power, who wields the real power here. And God help us if we ever get in those kinds of situations, but jeez.
Well, this makes me think about, DHH, David Hannemeyer Hansen, Rails, 37 Signals, his whole big push saying we're moving away from the cloud, very publicly saying, pull away from the cloud, basically rented servers directly. So you have more direct access to the hardware. You're looking at two extremes, right? And there are pros and cons to both sides. So it's something every company has to make their own decision about. But it's just this interesting situation, just a little insight as to what does a big company look like? What kind of IT costs might there be just for cloud hosting?
My bank account getting auto drafted $300K every day just for operating. Yeesh.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us next time on Thinking Elixir.